Anyways, yeah, so we're live right now. And yeah, I just want to give a little bit of an introduction about myself while people are still, waiting for people to come. My name is Living L to the IVING, and I am a money coach. And I want to talk about my journey financially, where I was, where I started from and where I am currently. And just a little bit of recap, I went from having $0 in investments to having over $30,000 saved and invested. And I went from being overly anxious about money. I was so anxious about money to the point where I was so scared to open my bank app, to, being able to open my bank app, being able to overcome that anxiety when it came to my finances, you know. So that's just a little bit of a introduction about me, just for the sake of, rewatch value. So yeah, that's a little bit of an introduction about me. So I'm just waiting for a couple people to come on live right now. So yeah. So that's a little bit of an introduction about me. Anyways, so I went from having $0 invested in the stock market to having over $30,000 saved and invested. And I went from being overly anxious about my money to, you know, being more confident when it came to my finances, being more strategic when it came to my finances. And today I want to talk about the things that I actually did to help me get here. It wasn't luck. It wasn't, it didn't happen overnight. I didn't just sleep, wake up, and then I just got better financially. That's not the way it works, But I'm here to tell you some of the things that I actually did. And we're going to focus on two aspects. There are two aspects that we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be focusing on the physical aspect and the spiritual aspect. Because yes, although I'm a money coach, I'm also a Christian. So I am also ensure that I I give you guys the truth on how I actually did this, you know, also including my Christian values on how God actually helped me. So that being said, the first aspect of it is the physical aspect, how I went from $0 to having over $30,000 saved and invested. And that's under the physical aspect. And the first thing that I did was I started learning how to invest. I started learning how to invest into the stock market. Yeah. So yeah, so that's what I did. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's what I did. I started learning how to invest and save into the stock market. Um And how I actually did that was because, I had talked to a whole bunch of different people. I talked to friends, I talked to family, I've been telling them I wanted to invest, but no one really, helped me. Everyone was, a little bit on the fence about, teaching other people how to save, how to invest, all these type of things because I believe they felt that because they weren't 100% sure about it, they did not want to, give any other person advice because, they would then feel responsible for if you make a mistake, right? So that's why I believe a lot of people, did not actively, you know, give me the skills that I needed to learn in that moment. But anyways, um, I started learning how to invest, how to save and invest by paying for a coaching program. Now, it might seem counterintuitive because, my finances weren't the best. And, you know, the goal was to increase my savings and investment. So if your goal is to increase your saving and investment, why would you then spend money? And I think that's the big mistake that a lot of people make. A lot of people believe that, it is an expense. It's not an expense, it's an investment. It's like, and I hear people talk about this a lot. I hear people talk about this a lot. Like, when you talk to big names in the financial industry, like let's say you watch a whole bunch of YouTube videos. Like, I have people like Mark Tilbury that I watch. I watch Minority Mindset. I watch Remit Sethi. All these different people, and usually, it's whenever they give advice to people on, okay, what do you do when you have your first $1,000? How do you invest your first $1,000? Usually what they would say is invest in yourself. And counterintuitively, I actually did that, but I never actually knew that I did that. So although I did not actually have the $1,000, what I had was a credit card. I don't advise every single person to do this, but in that point, I just wanted to make the change as quickly as possible. So what I did was I paid for this coaching program. Yeah, this coaching program cost me about $3,000. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't cheap. So I knew that I had to put in work. I had to put in work to ensure that this money was not a waste. To ensure that this money was not a waste. So I paid for the coaching program, and the coaching program cost me about $3,000. A little bit of backstory how I stumbled upon the coaching program. I was actually scrolling on TikTok. I was scrolling on TikTok, and then I seen this video of this lady. Primarily she coaches, her target audience is women, you know. But I saw her video, and then I saw her, just giving free nuggets on how to invest in the stock market, and I'm like, oh shoot, no one has actually done this publicly, and she's just giving it out for free. Usually people pay to see stuff like this, right? Um, so yeah, basically I saw that, and immediately I was drawn to her. Obviously, before someone is able to purchase your product, they have to be watching you for a certain amount of hours. So I kept track with her, constantly checking out her videos, and eventually I'm like, hey, cool, I'll just give this a shot. And I eventually purchased her coaching program, which was cost about $3,000, um $3,000, and if started the program, started taking it seriously. We went through a whole bunch of you know different things like mindset. We talked about the mindset, how to think about money. We talked about where your money is actually going to, and we talked about creating a budget, how to start investing, all those type of different things. And that really gave me the foundation of where I am currently, right? So learning all those different things gave me the foundation of where I am currently at. And sorry, I have a note on my screen, so just to keep me on track. And yeah, the moment I gathered momentum, I learned the little bit I needed to learn on how to start investing in the stock market. Then I started investing. I did not wait till I was perfect. A lot of people, they wait till they are perfect before they start investing, which is a very, very big mistake. I don't think the best way for you to learn is to actually do the thing. You do the thing, you learn, you do the thing, you learn, you do the thing, you make mistakes along the way. I think a lot of people are just avoiding doing the thing because they are trying to avoid making mistakes, which is in itself is actually a mistake. Because for you to get better at something, you need to make a mistake. Think about the first time you tried riding a bike. You didn't just get on the bike and then zoop, you started you know moving fast and then just paddling and paddling and things was working fine. No, you probably fell a couple times, you probably got injured, you probably cried a little bit, but that is just the way life is. Imagine watching a movie, and you know freaking the actor in the movie, like the main character, just for example, I don't know if anyone has watched Pursuit of Happiness. Imagine if Will Smith didn't go through all those struggles and then he just eventually just landed at the top. Right? It's not going to be interesting. What makes the journey interesting are the struggles and the hurdles that you have to go through. So being open to making those mistakes is super important. Being able to making those mistakes is incredibly important. And because I was open, I'm like, hey, what do I have to lose? I already don't have enough money saved and invested. I don't need to know everything, you know, so I might as well just do the thing. And I started investing in, I started I started investing through Wealth Simple, um, robo advisor. I used them for some time, but eventually, the more I learned, the more I just started to do things on my own. I started incorporating, I started investing in stocks, a few ETFs here and there. but I didn't really know that much about the ETF market. And what are ETFs? Most people might be confused when I use the word ETFs. ETFs are basically exchange traded funds. An exchange traded fund, which is basically like the most common term that people use is a basket of stocks. So rather than owning one particular, stock, you could own multiple stocks. So think about it. Let's say, you want to invest in tech, but you're a little bit skeptical about putting all your eggs into one basket, like let's say Meta. You don't want to put all your money into Meta, but you want to spread it across multiple tech stocks like Meta, like Apple, like Nvidia, all these different tech stocks like Microsoft and things of that nature. What you would do is you would use an ETF. Like you would invest in an index ETF that tracks all these companies. So you can invest in the tech industry, you can invest in groceries, consumer staple, you can invest in the fashion industry, you can invest in AI, all these different industries. You can invest in all these different industries using ETFs. So I started incorporating the use of ETFs, but I didn't really know about ETFs at first. You know, Obviously you learn and you grow. I started investing in stocks, in individual stocks. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this, but I wouldn't say a lot of people don't talk about this. I've seen a few people talk about it, but what is the thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about? It is um so when you're investing in stocks, a lot of people just get random tips. But for some reason, I was just chilling on my own, and then I thought to myself, actually, I wasn't chilling. My bad. I actually went to Walmart. I went to Walmart. I looked around, and I'm like, people are always here. People are always here. I go to Walmart like every week, maybe like once a week, and I always see people. And I'm like, why not buy a Walmart stock? At this time I was still investing using robo advisors. So I'm like, why not buy a Walmart stock? Like, they don't look like they're going out of business anytime soon. This is me without prior knowledge. I didn't have any knowledge of, looking at their books, looking at finances, balance sheets, all these different things. I just had intuition and eyes. I had eyes I could see, right? So every time I would go to Walmart, people would be there. Even during COVID, people were at Walmart. Tissue papers were just going out of stock because for some reason I still till this day do not know why people are buying tissue papers. But yeah, I went to Walmart. I'm like, hey, why not own a Walmart stock? Then I went home that day and I bought a Walmart stock. Then I thought about it again. I remember I had gone to Costco. I had gone to Costco, and I'm like, why not own a Costco stock? And then this is the point where I started thinking about, like, okay, when it comes to owning stocks, boring, like boring is the way to go. Like, things that have stood the test of time that are not exciting was the way to go. This was the thinking that I had during this time. So I'm like, okay, I bet. So by the time I bought, Costco was at $500. I had bought Walmart. I think Walmart at the time was at like 55 or $60. And those were what I started with. I started with those. And then eventually, obviously, like, as a beginner, you would hear tips from other people. I have my fiance, she actually told me about, VFV. She told me about ATD. And I actually thought that ATD was an ETF, but ATD was actually a stock. But mistakes you make along the way. So she told me about some ETFs. And I because I trusted her so much, and because I trust her so much, whatever she tells me to do, I just do it. So she told me about VFV, and then I bought VFV ETF, which is an and VFV is basically an ETF that tracks the top 500 companies in the US. If you're in the US market, you would probably call it VOO. You know, yeah, it's basically an ETF that tracks the top 500 companies in 500 companies in the US. So let's say like you have an ETF that isn't doing if it, let's say you have a company that isn't really doing the best, then since the ETF is passively managed, that company that isn't really doing the best will be replaced with another company. So that is exactly what passively managed ETFs are and how they work, basically. So I invested in that ETF. I invested in ATD. I think ATD means alimentation coach Tard. Is like Circle K, all these convenience stores. I invested in that, and yeah, I did not have all the knowledge, but I started. I started. You get the point. Eventually, I started reading more books. I started listening to podcasts. I started learning more about ETFs. I started learning more about the advantages of using ETFs, things of that nature. And eventually, I started dollar cost averaging. I wouldn't let a week go by without investing something. What is dollar cost averaging? Dollar cost averaging is investing regardless of if the market is up or if the market is down. You don't really care about the fluctuations. You that that doesn't that doesn't do anything for you. Like that doesn't affect you. You don't care about things like that. You just care about if your goal is $20 every week, put $20 every week. And that is essentially what I did. Most people they will be like, oh, I don't want to invest until I have a huge amount of money. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that wasn't the case for me. I knew that at the point that I was, anything at the point that I was at, literally any amount would help. I remember when I was starting out, I started investing with $5, which is the great thing about investing in the stock market. So when I talk about investing, I'm talking about investing in the stock market. You can buy fractional shares. A lot of brokers, would allow you to buy, would enable you to buy fractional shares. And okay, what is a broker? A broker is essentially a person or a body or an entity that gives you access into the stock market. What is the stock market? The stock market is a place where people buy and sell stocks. What is a stock? A stock is essentially a piece of a company. Yeah, so when you buy a stock, you're essentially buying a piece of a company and you become part owner of that company. So, yeah, where was I? I just lost track of thought. But yeah, dollar cost averaging. So I did not let a week go by without dollar cost averaging, and the amount did not necessarily matter to me. The amount did not matter. It could be $10, $20, $30. It didn't really matter to me. As long as I was consistent, that was the main thing that I cared about. So I did that, and eventually, while investing, growing, getting better, I started gaining more information. I started learning more, things of that nature. Things started getting more easier. And yeah, fast forward, I utilized the use of ETFs, like I said before, and I started educating myself, listening to podcasts, listening to watching videos, reading books. A few books that I've read. I've read I've read Psychology of Money, which is a really good book. I've read The Investor's Mindset, which is a really good book. I have read a few other books. I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, classic. Um, so many other books. Coming off the top of my head, I can't really remember them right now on the spot. The next book I'm about to read is "I Will Teach You to Be Rich" by Remit Sethi. I was actually just watching him a couple minutes ago, but you know, constantly constantly filling my mind with financial topics, books on finances. It just eventually helps you get better. And it also fortifies your belief system. Like, obviously, when you have friends, there are a lot of people that would be into different things. I have friends that trade, I have friends that, are into crypto, just fully into crypto. And being when you have the information of people that have been before you, people that have actually succeeded at doing the thing that you actually want to do, then it creates a fortified thinking. You're not easily swayed by every single thing that goes on online, right? You're able to actively make decisions for yourself. um because of educated information, right? You're not just swindling with what family are telling you, friends are telling you. So I noticed that because I was able to read all these different books, listen to all these podcasts, listen to people that have actually, made thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars and even billions. It helped fortify my strategy, you know, on how to actually save and actually how to actually invest. And consistently doing that over time eventually got me to a place where people were like, "Oh, living, you're good. Oh, living, you have like this amount of money saved." People would, come, commend me for, the good job, and when I would share my story online. But that is just because I stayed fortified. I listened to the things that I read books from people that were actually successful, and that is what actually helped me. I read books from people that are actually successful and not randomly taking advice from every single person that just comes online, or a friend that just passes by. No. So started educating myself, listening to podcasts, reading books, and that really helped out a lot. And that's the physical aspect. So when I started this video, I said that there were two aspects to this. There was the physical aspect, which enabled me go from $0 to over $30,000 saved and invested, and then there was the spiritual aspect that handled the anxiety, the fear of opening my bank app, all those different things of that nature. And now we're going to the second section. The second section, the anxiety part. Like when it comes to finances, I the financial anxiety was crazy. I was so scared to open my bank app. I remember there was this one time, and I say the story every single time because it's so vivid in my mind. I remember I was on my way back from work. I worked the night shift, and I was on my way back from work, taking the bus to my apartment, and I had just got paid. Fridays, usually Fridays payday, people are so excited. They're like, "Oh, I got some money. I'm gonna spend some money." But for me, Fridays were the worst days because it meant that I had to open my bank. It meant that I had to open up my bank app, you know, and it was crazy. It was crazy. I opened up the app. I mean, prior to opening up the app, there was so much anxiety. Like I felt like I was losing breath. Like I was crying at the back of the bus. Like it did not make sense. Like I was wondering, how did I get here? Like I didn't grow up poor. I didn't grow up poor. I have a really well-to-do family. I grew up, stable. My parents taught me about finances. I didn't grow up poor. So I'm like, where did this anxiety start coming from? I guess, when I eventually started working full time because I had just graduated university, I had all these bills on me. Usually I would wait for my parents before I'm able, my parents would provide me the funds that I needed to pay all these bills. But now doing everything on my own, I had all these bills on me and it was just so much. It was too much. So I remember that day at the back of the bus, anxiety and just worry. And I remember just crying and, you know, talking to God. I'm like, what's going on? Then what actually helped me were two things. Two things. The first thing is you actually have to face your fear. It sounds like a very, very cliche thing to say, but you know, and I remember this one song. I don't know if it's Katy Perry. She says, "What doesn't kill you makes you strong." Is it Katy Perry or I don't know? Correct me in the comment section. But she's like, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone." But anyways, yeah, literally, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Literally, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So eventually, you would have to face your fears. I'm at a place where whenever I see something that seems fearful, I always want to run towards it. Right. So at this point, I was filled with anxiety when it came to my money. I was filled with anxiety when it came to my finances. I did not know where to go, and you know I just decided to just face the fear. I had to open the bank app. I opened the bank app and um I started talking to my bank account. I had like $0, and I started praying. I started saying, God, thank you for this $2 million in the account. Thank you for this $3 million in the account. I started, I don't know if the right word to use is psyching myself. Okay, I wouldn't say psych myself. I would say I started speaking by faith. I started speaking like I had already had those things. So prayer, you know, because in the kingdom of God, talk is not cheap. God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. And in the 6 days He created the world, He spoke. So speaking, praying really, really helps as it pertains to the spiritual aspect, right? So when I did this constantly, whenever that anxiety comes, and sometimes it comes now and again, I just go straight and I start praying. I go straight and I start speaking. I go straight and I start praying, speaking, prophesying on my life and my finances and what I actually want to see for myself. So, yeah, those were the two aspects that helped me go from having $0 in investments to having over $30,000 saved and invested in the stock market. And yeah, that will be it for this video. Hope this video was actually helpful. Hope this video was informative. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, share it to friends and families. Actually, this is a laid back video. It's chilled. I'm actually on live right now. And usually I would have like a lot of people on live, but it's 11:06 a.m. And yeah, if I don't do it now, I'm probably just going to not do it. So hopefully YouTube algorithm help me out. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next video. That's it for me today. Shout out to the people that joined this live. And yeah, catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.